the citizens, or we're talking about the citizens or the government per se, they are not above the law. All right, they don't go over the law. So that is how it is. So with that, we'll get to look at some questions on how to answer some questions as well. After this explanation of the constitution and some majority rule, federalism, and so on. All right. So that's constitutionalism. That's the part. So the preamble to the constitution encapsulates these ideas, affirming that the government's powers are granted to protect the people, but are restrained to prevent injustice or oppression. So constitutionalism ensures a balance between granting the government enough authority to govern effectively and safeguarding the liberties of its citizens. So it is more like a balance. Constitutionalism is more like a check and balance on how the government are actually ruling, how they make use of authority to rule the people, and also safeguarding the liberties of its citizens. The next one, we have the majority rule. Principle of majority rule is also central to the functioning of American democracy, and decisions in a democracy are made by the majority. That's majority rule. So majority have the decisions to take in American democracy. That is the citizens. 90% of the citizens have majority function, the right to be able to rule and make decisions, all right, whether in election or legislative processes. So the founder of the United States recognized the potential dangers of unchecked majority power, particularly the risk of infringing on the rights of minority groups or individuals with unpopular views. So to address this, the system incorporates protections for minority rights, most notably through the Big Bill of Rights, which guarantees fundamental freedoms and safeguards against oppression. So this balance between majority rule and minority rule ensures that democracy remains fair and inclusive. So when you talk about the minority rule, that is probably those that are under the grassroots level, and the majority rule as well. So they need to balance this between the two citizens, the majority and the minorities, all right, through the Bill of Rights. Okay, so that is the majority rule. The definition of majority rule is when we have major citizens, majority of the citizens making decisions, whether in the election or legislative processes. All right, and so through the Bill of Rights, they will be able to, if the majority rule is going to go over the minority rule, they're able to balance it through the Bill of Rights. Then we have federalism, which is another one. Federalism is another essential principle which establishes a division of powers between the federal government and the state government. So this system allows both levels of government to exercise authority over specific areas while maintaining a balance of power. So that is federalism. Okay, that is talking about the division of power between the federal level of government and the state level of government. Okay, and it allows both level of government to be able to exercise its authorities over their specific areas while maintaining a balance of power. Just like you have different states in America, we have different states in America, and these states have those that are actually governing them. So they have their own authority according to the states, and on the federal level, which is the presidential level, they have their own authority as well. So this is federalism, is when these two people, the federal level and the state level, we are able to exercise their authority within their areas. All right. So moving on, we have these principles: natural rights, popular sovereignty, constitutionalism, majority rule with minority rights, and federalism form the bedrock of the American political system. So these principles are natural rights, popular sovereignty, constitutionalism, majority rule with minority rights, and federalism. They form the bedrock of the American political system. So together they create a framework that balances individual freedoms, collective governance, and the distribution of power, ensuring a system that is both resilient and adaptable. So coming together of these things creates a framework that balances what individuals' freedom, and also make people to be able to gather and perform in government, in governance as well. And there's this distribution of power. So this structure has allowed the United States to navigate the complexities of governance while remaining committed to the ideals of democracy and liberty. All right. So that is that on the principles of the basic principles of American constitutional democracy. All right. So natural rights, popular sovereignty, constitutionalism, majority rule with minority rights, and federalism on basic principles. So let's check questions on basic principles of American constitutional rights. Can we see the screen?
Yes.
All right. So we can see the question here. It said instructions, read each statement carefully and select the principle it reflects. All right. We have number one here that says all will bear in mind this sacred principle that though the will of the majority is in all cases to prevail, that will to be rightful must be reasonable, that the minority possess their equal rights, which equal law must protect, and to violate would be oppression. That's Thomas Jefferson. Okay. What kind of principle is being reflected in this quote? What kind of principle is being reflected in this quote? For the quote again, it says
The
all will be in mind. What did he say?
the B, minority rights, maybe.
Minority rights. That's very correct. All right. That is very, very correct. We have the minority rights. So he said, all we bear in mind this sacred principle that though the will of the majority is in all cases to prevail, that will to be rightful must be reasonable, that the minority possess their equal rights. So if the majority rule are actually possessing their what's equal right? So definitely the minority rule must have their own rights as well. So that answer, that is correct. Thank you very much. And we have number two that says everyone deserves to enjoy certain freedoms and have the opportunity to achieve a reasonable quality of life. Okay, what kind of principle is that for number two?
Maybe the correct answer is C, popular sovereignty.
Popular sovereignty. We have everyone deserve. Okay, let's look at that together. Everyone deserves to enjoy certain freedoms and have the opportunity to achieve a reasonable quality of life. This is where we have natural rights philosophy. Do you understand
Yeah.
that? So the answer is natural rights philosophy. So everyone deserves to enjoy certain freedoms. So these certain freedoms are the natural rights that I discussed earlier, that as a human being, you already have a right as a human being. So these rights, the government cannot intervene into it, and you don't need the approval of the government before you can have this right. So, and have the opportunity to achieve a reasonable quality of life. So with this kind of right, as a natural right, you have the opportunity to achieve a reasonable quality of life for yourself. So that is what they mean by the natural rights. Government can't take this away from you, and the government's you don't need the government's approval before you can have them. Unlike the minority rights or the limited government or popular sovereignty. Do you understand that?
Yes, it's true. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, thank you very much. All right, so number three says citizens have the ability to express their opinions about the rules and laws they are expected to follow. So what kind of basic principle is that?
Maybe this one is the C, popular sovereignty.
Correct. That is very correct. Popular sovereignty. That is correct. Citizens have the ability to express their opinion. So it is a popular sovereignty. That is very, very correct. Thank you very much. All right. Number four here, we have the Scottish philosopher John Locke stated that the government's primary responsibility is to safeguard people's right to life, liberty, and property. So what kind of principle states this John Locke's philosophy?
Is the A the first one? Limited government, maybe?
Limited government? No. It is actually the natural right philosophy. All right, let's go back to the note. Let's go back to the note where John Locke was actually talked about. All right, so we have this is the natural. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
All right. So we have the bold, the one written in this bold um, note is natural rights. And under this natural right, that is where we have the thinker, Enlightenment thinker, John Locke. All right. So it is actually the natural rights. And that was where he mentioned that asserting that the primary duty of government is to protect individuals' right to life, liberty, and property. Do you see the highlighted one?
Oh, yes. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so it is. All right, so it is John Locke. Thank you very much for that. So let's go back to the question. Okay. Question 5 says, when the US Constitution was written, the federal government lacked the power to raise its own funds and relied on states to finance its operations. So, what kind of principle is this?
I'm not sure, but maybe this one is limited government because
That is
the
very correct. That is very
yeah.
correct. Limited government. That is correct because the government is actually limited and they could not actually have the power to raise its own funds and relied on states to finance its operation. So the government will be actually limited in that sense. Do you understand that?
Yes.
All right,
Thank
thank you very much for that. Okay, so moving on, we'll look at structure and design of the U.S. federal government. That is what we're going to be looking at next. Okay, um, structure. Yes, structure and design of the U.S. federal government. So the structure of the U.S. federal government is grounded in the principle of separation of powers. It is grounded in this principle of separation of powers, which ensures that governmental authority is distributed among three distinct branches: the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. Okay, so we have these the three branches of government that has been explained here. They are the structural government that enhances separation of power. So with these that enhances separation of power, we could actually see that um, powers are being separated between these three um, positions, or these three authoritarian positions, and that is the executive, the judiciary, and the legislative. Okay, so that is where we have the structure of the American constitutional democracy. So moving on, we have this framework established by the US Constitution prevents any single branch from accumulating excessive power, fostering a balanced and accountable system of governance. All right. So the division of power is complemented by a system of checks and balances. So these three parts these three branches that has been distributed, it is mainly created so as for any branch not to have an accumulated excessive power. Okay, so one branch needs to check the other. So the executive will check the legislative, and the legislative will check the judiciary, or vice versa. All right, so that is how we have these three branches of government, so that there won't be any excessive use of power. If the executive is having excessive use of power, the legislative what? The legislative will come down to warn the executive that is already making use of the power too much. If the judiciary is doing the same thing, the executive can do the same thing to the judiciary. Okay, that is why we have the separation of power. All right. So each branch, the next paragraph says, each branch of the US federal government has a unique and essential role. The first one, which is the legislative branch, is represented by what? Congress. Is responsible for crafting and enacting law. That is, they are responsible for making laws. Congress itself is bicameral, consisting of the Senate and the House of Representatives, which work together to legislate on matters of national importance. Okay, members of Congress are elected by the people, ensuring that this branch reflects the will of the electorate. Okay, so they are given this responsibility of making laws, enacting laws, crafting laws. The legislative branch are being given the authority of doing that. So the next paragraph talked about the executive branch, which is headed by the president, okay, who is selected separately from Congress. All right. If you notice in the legislative branch, the people select those that represent them in being part of making laws. All right. And those are the members of Congress. Then in the executive branch, which is being headed by the president, is elected separately from the Congress. Every people or every citizen select this person to be their what? Their president. So the president's primary responsibility is to enforce and implement the laws passed by the Congress. All right. So it's just to enforce and implement laws passed by the Congress. All right. So the executive branch also includes the president's administration, conspiring of cabinet members and various federal agencies. One of the president's significant power is the ability to veto legislation, providing a check on Congress authority. So, in the sense whereby he has the veto power to be able to check the legislatures, in as much as we have the what, in as much as we have the in as much as we have the checks and balances and also separation of power. So definitely the legislature and the executive checks the legislature in that manner. All right. So moving on, we have, however, Congress can override a presidential veto with a two-third majority in both houses, exemplifying the balance inherent in the system. So it is more like exemplifying the balance between the governmental power, the veto power, over the use of power. And also, if the power is using is not reasonable to some extent, the president will have his own way through this. All right. So moving on. So moving on, we have the judicial branch. We talk about the legislative, we talk about the executive, and now we are going down to the judicial branch. All right. So they are being represented by the court system, and is tasked with interpreting the laws and ensuring their alignment with the Constitution, interpreting the laws and ensuring their alignment. Ensuring the alignment. Sorry.
Yes.
All right. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
All
Yes, it's
right.
better.
So moving on. So we have the judicial branch. What they do, the judicial branch, what they do is for them to interpret the law to the citizens and ensure that it is actually in the Constitution, and ensure that it's actually made with the Constitution. Because you cannot just make law, the legislative cannot make law that it goes against the Constitution. So what they do is to check the kind of law they make, if it actually goes with the Constitution. All right. So the Supreme Court, as the highest judicial authority, plays a pivotal role in resolving disputes over the constitutionality of laws and government actions. So the Supreme Court is actually the highest judicial authority. So if there's any dispute if there's any dispute between um, the branches of government and law in process of making laws and all, so he has the right to come into power or come into place and try to settle this dispute. And that is what it is. He interprets the law and ensure that it is aligned with the constitution. All right, so um moving on, we have the interaction between these branches under the checks and balances system is crucial for maintaining a functional democracy. So it is very, very important. It's very, very important so as to go into what so as to make and maintain a functional democracy. Moving on. For instance, while the president can veto legislation, Congress holds the power to impeach and remove the president for misconduct. So if the president is having a misconduct or is getting power drunk, the legislative have the power to impeach the president at that point. Okay. So similarly, the judiciary can declare laws or executive actions unconstitutional, but judges are appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. All right. So it is the president, that's the executive, that appoints the judges, and the Senate or the legislative actually confirms it and approves it. Okay, tying the branches together in a web of accountability. So they try to tie them together so that they can be accountable to themselves. All right, we have a diagram. Here we have a diagram of their branches, and we have Congress approves presidential nominations and controls the budget. It can pass laws over to the president's veto and can impeach the president and remove him or her from office. We have the legislative branch, that's the Congress, which consists of House of Representatives, Senate or House and Senate can veto each other's bills. That is, it consists of House of Representatives and Senate. So House and Senate can veto each other's bills. Then we have executive branch, which is the government, the president rather, executive office of the president, executive and cabinet department, independent government policies. The president can veto congressional legislation. Then we have the court can declare laws unconstitutional. Then we have the Senate confirms the president's nomination. Congress can impeach judges and remove them from office. Then we have the judicial branch, which is the court. We have the Supreme Court, Court of Appeal, and District Court. So it is the district court that is down to the grassroots level. After the district law court, we have the Court of Appeal. After the Court of Appeal, we have the highest one, which was the Supreme Court. So moving on, we'll talk about each branches. The first one is the legislative branch. Okay, the legislative branch. And here we have the legislative branch of the US government, known as Congress, consists of two chambers, the House of Representatives and Senate. Okay, so these chambers, while equal in legislative power, differs in their composition, election processes, and responsibility. Okay, together they form a bicameral legislature designed to balance the interests of both the population and the state. So the state. Sorry, something came up right now. Trying to do that. So sorry, moving on. So we have the House of Representative offers often referred to as the lower house. That's the House of Representative is often referred to as the lower house in government. And we have is composed of members elected from districts within each state. Districts within each state. Moving on, it said these districts are drawn to represent approximately represent approximately each populations and are adjusted every 10 years based on the results of the US census. So we have two seats or two chambers in the Congress, and that is the House of Representatives and the Senate. So they're talking about the House of Representatives, which is the lower house, and the Senate is the what? The upper house. Okay, so members of the House of Representatives serve 2-year term, making them more directly accountable to their constituents, and the House is led by the Speaker of the House. That's the House of Representatives. House is led by the Speaker of the House. So they have just 2-year term to lead in the House. Then we have the Senate. They have this is the upper house, represent the states equally, with each state electing 2 senators regardless of population size. All right, so each state, different states, they have they will pick 2 senators that's going to represent them in this chamber. Okay, so and senators serve for 6 years. They serve for 6 years. So we have the powers of the Congress are enumerated in Article 1 of the US Constitution. So these powers, known as enumerated powers, include critical functions such as the ability to tax, regulate commerce, coin money, maintain the military, declare war, admit new states, and approve treaties. So that is their job. That's the Congress. Okay. And ability to tax, regulate commerce, coin money, maintain the military, declare war, admit new states, and approve treaties. Then we have the elastic clause. It's also called the necessary and proper clause, which grants Congress the flexibility to expand its powers to address issues not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution, allowing it to adapt to changing circumstances. All right, so moving on, we have the executive branch. The executive branch of the United States government is led by the president, and which is plays a central role in enforcing and implementing the national law. Alongside the president, the vice president, and various executive agencies contribute to the branch functions. All right. So, and it ensures that the directives of Congress and needs of the nation are carried out effectively, and that is it. So this branch is operates under the guideline established by Article 2 of the United States Constitution. Article 1 was the legislative, and secondly now, which is the Article 2 of the United States Constitution, is the executive functions. It defines the presidential's or the president's responsibilities, powers, and qualifications. So the president serves as both the head of state and the head of government, and he serves for just 4 years. That's 4-year term. He used 4-year term on his seat. Okay, and it's a president may serve a maximum of 2 terms. That's 4-year term, or he can serve for 2 terms, which is 8 years. All right. So as set forth by this 22nd Amendment to the Constitution. So among the president's key duties is to act as the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, and also to appoint federal judges and enforcing federal laws. So these are the responsibilities of the president, which is: one, is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces; two, he has the ability to what? To appoint federal judges; three, enforcing federal laws; four, using veto bills, authority to veto bills passed by the Congress; then five, negotiate is to negotiate and sign treaties with other countries. Okay, negotiate and sign treaties with other countries. And additionally, the president delivers the State of the Union address annually. State of the Union address annually. And the Constitution also specifies 3 qualifications for presidential candidates. He must be 35 years old, a natural born citizen, all right, and reside in the country for at least 14 good years. That's the criteria, or that's the criteria. 35 years old, natural born citizen, and also must stay in the country for 14 good years. And that is it on under the executive. Then the judiciary, we have the federal government, that's the judges. So now let's go to questions let's go to questions based. Okay, we are done. If you talk about the judiciary, we are done with that. So let's go to questions based on these structures. All right. So I have here. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
All right. So I have here, it says, read each statement below and determine which branch of government is being checked by the described action. Then categorize each statement into the appropriate column in the table. So we have here, it said, note, in an interactive format such as the GED test, you would drag each statement into the correct column of the diagram. All right. So here we have how each government branch is controlled by checks and balances. So we have actions that checks the legislative branch. Out of these boxes, yeah, we have to pick the actions that checks the legislative branch. Out of these boxes that we have here. So we have the president nominates judges to Supreme Court. We have another box that says Congress has the power to remove the president from office. Then we have another one that says the president has the power to veto laws enacted by the Congress. So out of these boxes, which is going to be part of the actions that checks the legislative branch out of the boxes?
Okay, I think that the president nominates judge to the Supreme Court is for the executive branch.
Is what?
For executive branch, the second one. This one, yes, is an action that checks the executive branch.
Okay, that the president nominates judges to the Supreme Court. Yes, that is very, very correct. That is the actions that check the executive. That's under the executive branch. That is very, very correct. All right. So the second box that we have here that says Congress has the power to remove the president from office. Okay. So which action is that? Which branch is that?
This one is a judicial branch.
What did you say?
A judicial branch. The third one.
The judicial branch.
Yes.
Is it this second one? The Supreme Court decides.
Eh, yes.
All right. So the Supreme Court decides if laws enacted by Congress follows the guidelines of the Constitution. That's under the judicial branch, which is actually correct. It's under the judicial branch, which is actually correct. Now let's look at the second rule. The first one on the second rule, that the second rule for the boxes. The first one here says Congress has the power to remove the president from office. What branch talks about that?
El Congreso is
Is what?
this is an action that checks the legislative branch.
The what? Actions that check the.
Legislative branch.
Thank you, legislative branch. That is correct. That is very, very correct. So the next, the one underneath, the box underneath that, it said the Senate must confirm persons nominated for the Supreme Court. Which box is each branch is that? The Senate must confirm persons nominated for the Supreme Court.
Legislative branch.
Very good, legislative branch. So the third rule, we have the president has the power to veto laws enacted by the Congress. Which branch is that?
Is an executive branch.
Very, very correct. Very correct. And the last box that we have there, the Supreme Court determines whether the actions of the president are permitted by the Constitution. So, which branch is that?
The Supreme Court determines it. Is the judicial branch.
The judicial branch. Very good. That is very, very correct. All right. That is very, very correct. Thank you so much for your attentiveness for the class. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much for that. Um, and that is all we'll be discussing for today. Just the basic principles of the American Constitution and the structure. And that's the three branches of the American government. And that is what we are going to be. That's what we are going to be ending for today. Thank you very much for attentiveness in the class. Thank you. We'll see in our next class.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. You're welcome. You're welcome. All
Bye.
right. Have a good day.
You too.
Yeah.